Today's webinar is on the transition from APA 6th edition to 7th edition. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Julie Johnson. I work in the Online Writing Center alongside Dr. Basil Considine, who will be presenting with me this webinar. Together, we will provide you with a lot of important information, but also we will be here to answer any questions you have. So a quick logistics note. If you have any questions, either as we are presenting or during our designated question and answer time, simply type them into the chat box, and Dr. Considine or I will get to your questions as soon as we can. I highly recommend grabbing a notepad, maybe opening up a Word document if you prefer, to jot down anything you want to come back to later if you are a note taker like myself. However, as always, this webinar will be recorded, and you can access this video alongside the slide deck from this presentation at the Online Writing Center's website. So this presentation is intended to be a resource for you to come back to. You can even print out some of these slides, refer back to them as often as you need when you're beginning to use the APA 7th edition. All right, let's begin. So I'll give you an overview of this webinar first, and by the end of this hour, you will know more about APA 7 and the resources available to you. You should also feel more confident about using APA 7th edition. So first, we will go over ACU Dallas's transition timeline. A hint, we will begin using APA 7 in the summer 1 term. So don't panic, not yet. We will also go over the specific resources that are available to you during and after our transition. We will briefly go over the most notable changes about the 7th edition, most of which are long awaited and will make all our lives much easier. Next, we'll dive into APA 7, giving you a crash course on all the information that you need to know to begin using this edition yourselves next term. We end with some advice on navigating this change and some more resources for you before we have a time dedicated to answering any questions you have for us. Again, we'll do our best to answer questions as they come in the chat box, but we will discuss your questions in real time at the end of this presentation. And Dr. Considine, why don't you give us the why behind APA 7?
Sure. So a lot of things when a style manual changes, if we think about what happens when you get out of a long-term relationship and you start dating in the exact opposite direction, that's something about what happens. Some of it are good things. Some of it are just reactions to what's happened before. So APA 5th edition, which I know some of our faculty used when they wrote their dissertations, and that was being used when I started in grad school myself, APA 5th edition was very much a reaction to the popularity of the typewriter. Now, the typewriter had some things that were very easy to do and some things that weren't easy to do. And drawing tables was not something I was very good at. So there was not a whole lot of fancy table stuff that you do in APA 5th edition. There was also this idea in the 1980s that social science research had to be very objective. And so you would always use the most formal language possible. It was, social scientists were trying to assert, we have legitimate disciplines, we deserve research funding just like everyone else, our stuff is important, and one of the ways that we're going to show you is that we are going to be very serious in how we word things. Well, the natural extreme that this went to was that people would never use the word I to refer to themselves. And so you'd have passages like, the researcher conducting this study will do X, where the researcher has all these things that sound an awful lot like me, but I'm not going to just tell you this is me doing it. And so that could get confusing. And so APA 6th edition said, okay, you can use I. You can make I statements, just don't go overboard with it. And so that there was a clear reason, a benefit of let's clarify who is doing what. But also one of the things that happened is that some people ran to the opposite extreme and started using I all over the place, where it just got confusing because it seemed like the emphasis of the paragraphs was about the writer, not about what they were doing. So there's that. And then in each edition, there have been some things where there were rules that were created that had good reasons for being the way they were, but just there are so many ones that were inconsistent. And so you'll see as we go through the notable changes that there are a lot of simplifications where they say, you know what, we should just do the same thing all the time. Why bother to have two separate things when we could just have one way of doing it for all of these things that are kind of the same? And those do save an awful lot of time and trouble, whether you're learning APA 7th for the first time or you're just trying to proofread your manuscript in APA 6th edition. I'll tell you more about that as we go through. But most of the changes have been either just recognizing shifts in language, so the use of they as a singular pronoun, so you don't need to write he/she, you can just use they in those cases, and just simplifying some of the rules so you're doing the same thing all the time. Back to you.
Great. So let's talk about the switch timeline for ACU Dallas. Now, APA 7 was released in October of 2019, but ACU has decided to officially make the transition in the summer 1 term to allow everyone the time to make the switch. So all students at ACU Dallas will use APA 7th edition for new courses, assignments, etc., beginning in summer 1, 2020. So what that means is that you'll continue to use APA 6th edition for the rest of this term, spring 2, and doctoral students who are currently working on their dissertation or doctoral project manuscript can make appointments with the Writing Center at any time for help switching to APA 7th edition. Any doctoral students who have already reached or expect to reach the editorial review stage in your process before the end of this term, spring 2, you can continue using APA 6th edition. And don't worry, we will go over resources specifically for doctoral students and their chairs in this webinar. Now I'll go over the resources that will help you be successful with APA 7. I'll tell you about our new templates, video tutorials for specific APA needs, and a few other miscellaneous resources we have to offer. Again, the Writing Center's APA page will be fully updated and available to you in week 0 of summer 1. It will include all of the resources we covered today, including a quick guide that you can view already at this link here at the bottom of your slide. This guide covers the most common features of APA and how the old rules have been updated in the new edition, including some helpful links if you're interested in a certain topic, like about APA formatting and citation rules. This is a good beginning place for you to start. You can go ahead and view or download our latest APA templates. Dr. Considine has worked really hard to update the course paper template that is easy to use for all ACU Dallas students. It's already set up and formatted automatically in APA 7th edition. So use this template for courses starting in summer 1. He's also updated the EDD and DNP doctoral manuscript templates, all of which can be found at this link on the screen. Dr. Considine has also created some targeted videos to help you through the transition. The first link is the top 5 things you can leave out and don't need to worry about anymore with APA 7th edition. This is a good one to get you started and feeling confident about APA 7. Also, if you're a doctoral student, these next 2 will be especially useful to you. 10 tips for converting your dissertation manuscript. This is where you can watch and also workshop your draft at the same time by pausing the video and going and doing some of these step-by-step processes. That's a time saver for you for sure. Then, if you want to know more, this last video is an in-depth example of converting a manuscript to APA 7th edition. And all of these videos are invaluable, and I highly recommend them, not only for our doctoral students, but all ACU Dallas students and faculty and staff to get a good idea of the basics of APA 7 on the doctoral level. So all of these links will be available to you after the webinar, and you can access them via the slide deck that will be posted on our website. There are many more resources available to you, both ones that we have created in the Online Writing Center and from other online sources. So here are a few we think are most useful to you as you are beginning to use APA 7. First, the APA style blog is already updated with APA 7, and they post great blogs at this link. APA has put out many helpful resources and guides that are free to the public. And this second link is a guide to creating a reference entry in APA 7, and it's a helpful visual for you to see all of the different components of a reference in APA 7. The APA Style website is also an incredibly rich resource with many detailed pages organized by topic, from formatting to grammar and mechanics to citations and more. And so I highly recommend checking out this official guide to the changes at APA Style point apa.org. And that will really be a good one for you to review.
Be actually talking to her via the pod, here in the group.
All right, these last two links are more resources for you. And this first one, the 7th edition templates, sample tables, and sample figures are all available just to ACU Dallas students and the community. So you can access all of those resources right now. It's a Google Drive a Google Drive folder, excuse me. This last link is to APA 7th edition sample papers. And these are from APA themselves. So if you're a visual person and like seeing how all of these rules will look in an actual paper, this is the link for you. As I mentioned, the Online Writing Center is updating our own APA page. This will be your primary APA resource warehouse, your one-stop shop. And in week 0 of Summer 1, 2020, we will replace our featured pages on APA 6th edition with APA 7th edition information and resources. We've chosen this timing to reduce any potential confusion because we are still operating in APA 6th edition during spring 2. So our APA 6th edition pages will be clearly labeled as such, and they'll still be available for anyone who may need those resources. Our older webinar recordings will be marked as containing APA 6 examples, so look for that marking. Our new webinars, especially those we begin in Summer 1 and moving forward, will be marked as containing APA 7 examples. So now I'll hand things over to Dr. Considine to discuss APA 7's notable changes.
Thank you, Julie. And just to make sure the slide sharing has switched over correctly, does everyone see a nice Halloween-themed RIP headstone? Okay, that's why we're checking. Let me run that through again. Can you see it now? All right, hold on just a moment. All right, and let's just be doubly sure. Do you see no headstone now? We've gone to different references. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm going to talk to you first about some of the main changes that you want to be aware of. And then we're going to go ahead and progress to to doing a hands-on walkthrough. One moment, I'm just getting a whole bunch of messages, so I want to double check those. All right, so the changes. First off, we're going to start up with the very beginning of the paper, where usually the first thing that you do is fill in the running head information. Well, the running head is entirely gone now. Just if you are turning in a course paper, you don't have to write one ever again. There are a couple APA specific journals where they'll ask you to put that in. That's mainly so people printing things out won't lose track of them. Don't worry about that. For your course papers, no more running head. And now with the publisher locations, and those are also gone. You know, that New York, NY, Chicago, IL, Boston, MA, that's all out. You don't need to worry about including those in the reference list. So it's a big time saver. It also makes the reference a little bit cleaner and easier to read. Same thing with marking the book edition as electronic. You might be wondering, well, wait, isn't that important? Well, about 10 years ago it was, because Kindle edition would often be missing all the images and stuff. And nowadays, book publishers are like, yeah, we're producing this electronically. Here's our PDF. And so it looks just like a printed book. So you don't need to mark a book edition as being electronic. Giving a website URL of any sort, we don't need that retrieved from. Just give us the date. Just give us the URL. If you have 3 or more authors, you always abbreviate that. And also, we just use one DOI format. I was talking earlier about evolutionary changes. Well, in between when APA 6th edition came out and APA 7th edition came out, they went through several rounds of, but would it be easier if we wrote DOIs this way? So we ended up with 3 different ways, which were all correct in APA 6th edition. Well, in APA 7th edition, it's just one way to do the DOI, a link that you click on and immediately go to the source. We also no longer have 2 spaces after a period. And the fact that it's only ever 1 space after any punctuation. And so don't worry about it. One of the proofreading things you can do is just do a find and replace for 2 spaces and replace it with 1. Someone asked in the chat room what a DOI is. DOI is a digital object identifier. It is a code that is meant to always take you to where that resource, whether it's a book or a journal article, lives online. Because a publisher might be bought out, or the journal might change its name and change its website URL, but the DOI should always lead you to where it is now. This is why DOIs are the preferred source when they're available versus, a link to a copy on the professor's personal website. If you don't have a DOI, then you link preferentially to the journal article on the journal site, and then if that's not available, to wherever you can find it. But if the DOI is available, always use that. We're also getting rid of some inconsistencies with how you would number and label figures and tables and where the titles or captions would go. Now it's always above the item, which is just one of those things where at the time when image printing was very expensive, they had this idea that you would always have your figures on a completely separate page, and it might be a photograph that you printed out and just sewed into the rest of your dissertation manuscript. Well, now we do it all digital, so we don't need it on a separate page. And yes, if the slides have been designed so that you can print them out as a copy of this notable change list. All right, we're also getting rid of some inconsistencies in how headings are capitalized and bolded. As you may recall, in APA 6th edition, once we got to the third, fourth, and fifth headings, they'd start being at the start of paragraphs and not be using title case. Well, they said, you know what, let's just have the headings always be in title case, which is so much easier because you always know it's going to be in title case, it's always going to be bolded, and maybe there's some other formatting, but always title case and always bolded. It also makes it stand out visually a little bit more. There are also a couple things that are just different. In terms of references, perhaps not so much in education, but very much in nursing when you get into postdoctoral publication and you're working on a big team. Used to be you'd only list up to 7 authors in your references list, and anything after number 6 and before number 7 would just be abbreviated with ... This meant that someone who might be author number 7 on a 20 author thing might be, could I please be listed as number 20 just so my name shows up? Well, now we'll list up to 20 author names, and if they're more than that, then we just abbreviate that with ellipses. Also, I mentioned that one DOI format. Well, something about that is that any link, whether it's a DOI or just a regular link, should always be clickable now. There were some inconsistencies where the manual said, don't make it a hot link, but in practice, people are like, this is so handy to have a hot link. Well, now it's always going to be a hot link, a working link that you can click on. They, as a gender neutral pronoun, talked about that earlier. If you have something that's a series or conference materials where the conference might have gone over a number of days, you can now write that date range in where you'd normally have just had the year in APA 6th edition. We talked about the figures and tables. Well, some specifics that we'll show you in a moment. And the labels and the titles are now above. And what was called the figure caption before, because it was below, we now format it exactly the same way that we would a table title, meaning in title case and italicized. And some small tweaks to the APA level 3 to 6 headings that we touched on earlier. There are also some differences between student paper and publication formatting. Don't worry about the publication formatting. Those rules really only apply when you are submitting an article to a journal that says APA 7th edition, which right now is just those run by the American Psychological Association itself. Don't worry about it when you're doing a student paper. Don't worry about it when you are writing your dissertation. The rules that I'm showing you today are all the student paper rules. We'll also go through those formatting changes a little bit more, in-text citations, tables and figures with examples to show at you, the references page, and talk about that use of they a bit. So there was always a difference between the so-called draft guidelines and the publication guidelines in APA 6th edition. The problem was they were mostly scattered here and there, so you really had to read the whole manual to find all of them. What they've done now is said, okay, we're going to have clearly marked set of, here are the ways that the publication formatting is different, which means for most practical purposes, we can just ignore the publication formatting rules existence, because course papers, student papers, use the student paper rules. Moving on to formatting changes. We've got left-hand and right-hand columns here. Left is how things were in APA 6th edition. Right is how things are in APA 7th edition. So I mentioned that there's only going to be one space after period, or actually one space after any punctuation, and that the running head is going away. So that means the only thing you'll have in the top margin of your paper will be the page numbers. We're also having the levels of heading that you're going to be using simplified to follow that consistent, that will always be in title case and always be bolded. And because of that, there's some also little tweaks we'll get into in a moment. And then we talked about how the table and figure formatting is the same. So 2 spaces. This is something that causes a lot of confusion and some disagreements about how to interpret the instructions in the APA 6th edition manual. Now, I once interviewed for a job with the American Psychological Association, and where the job would have been essentially to answer questions about APA formatting. So I was talking with one of the people who wrote that section, and they said, yeah, that was not my best work. It's very confusing. People ask us about it all the time, which is when I was saying APA 7th edition is partly a reaction to all the questions they got about 6th edition. Now we're just always going to have one space after punctuation, never two. And the easiest way to do this is to just run a find and replace operation using the instructions here. Search for 2 spaces, replace that with 1, and just keep running it until it's done. If you've got 3 spaces, don't worry, just run that twice and it'll be down to 1. And you do want to make sure that you're not using manual spacing in tables. If you're not sure how to get tables to work in APA style, just make an appointment with me and we'll work that out. So here's a side-by-side showing some of the differences between APA 6th and 7th edition. On the left hand is 6, on the right hand is 7, where you see the title is now bolded and there's a little extra space put in there. And the title is also bolded on the first page of the body of your document. So that just makes things stand out visually. And you'll see that we don't have that redundant, okay, the title's in the running head and it's on the first page of the body. Now, here, I mentioned that the headings had changed a little bit. The main one that the dissertation people and the doctoral project people want to be aware of is that the level 3 headings are no longer on the first line of a paragraph, which is to say, the level 2 headings have always been flush left. The level 3 headings are now flush left as well. And they're different from the level 2 headings because the italics are added. We go to level 4. Level 4 is first line of the paragraph, title case, bold. Level 5, same thing, just italics thrown in on it. So it's a more logical system, and that we're limiting the number of things being changed, and that, again, they're just always bolded and title case. And this is just to summarize those in case you are printing those out and want to have this on your checklist. Next one, and this is a big time saver when you are proofreading your manuscript to submit. Used to be that you'd have to have works with 3 to 5 authors, writing out all the authors the first time and then abbreviating. And if you had 6 or more, to always abbreviate. Well, I can't tell you how many times I've had students come back and say, my professor went and checked all of my citations and found these 15 things I need to change. And if we were having the same situation with APA 7th edition, none of that would need to be there, because if you ever saw 3 or more authors written out outside the reference list, you just abbreviate it every time. So this is going to be a nice sanity saver for both students and faculty. Tables and figures used to have those different rules where the figure stuff would go below the image. Now they're going to follow the same format. I've prepared some examples for you. Let's see. Oh, question about the previous slide about those citations. Yes, that is referring to parenthetical and in-text citations. The reference list, you will again write out up to 20 authors, and if there are more than 20, you abbreviate the authors after 19 with ... then have the very last author listed at the end. Back to tables and figures. Yes, those examples there. The main thing is that essentially APA 7th edition, it looks like the APA 6th edition table rules, except with the table label being bolded. What's the table label? That's that thing with the number in it, like table 1, table 2, which you can see in this example. Table X, that text would be bolded. The table title after it is still italicized, still in title case. The notes still go underneath it, but the table label, that table 1, table 2, table 3 bit, is now bolded. So if you have tables set in your draft and you're wondering how to update it, just go and do a find search for capital T table. with a space after it. And then each time you find one of these tables, bold the label. And then you'll be done with converting your tables over. And yes, you will be able to copy and paste your draft into the template. You'd want to go chapter by chapter, and with other things like your appendices and abstracts, copy and paste those separately. But we have designed this so a lot of the things, when you do that copy and paste, will just automatically update over. Here's an example of how a literature review matrix, which I know a lot of the students in both of our doctoral programs do either as a study aid or for an assignment, how the literature review matrix would look different in each thing. So we have, again, APA 6th edition on the left and APA 7th edition on the right. And you'll see that we have a number of changes, which let me just highlight them for you here. Those ones, which are all the sources that have 3 or more authors, get abbreviated to first author et al. Immediately. Now, you'll see that with those 2 Americus examples, that we don't abbreviate everything to et al. Because they have different second authors. And so to tell which one is which, we need Maricus Arriva et al. And Maricus Pustunikova et al. And that's actually the same way that it's being done in APA 6th edition, where you need to distinguish between sources that still have the same first or sometimes first couple of authors. Just we do the abbreviation from the beginning. This is just an annotated view of a table with some labels. These labels are very helpful if you are asking a question about how do I get this to look that way? For example, if you were saying, I'm trying to get the decked heads to look right, this tells you what that terminology is. And if you say that to me, I'll be like, oh, yes, I know what you're referring to. Otherwise, you might have to start counting things like, okay, I think this is row 3. How do I get that underline there? Well, just, if you refer to those terms, it just clarifies it for everyone. And I think that's all we have here. Figures, again, and what used to be the separate figure caption at the bottom is moving up top. We capitalize that in title case and put it in italics, and then the figure label, figure 1, figure 2, is bolded. I do recommend that while you're at it, you take a look at the formatting for the axis labels, because if you're making your own figures, knowing that this is how it's supposed to end up looking at lets you practice this in your courses. Sometimes students will be getting to the dissertation stage and say, gosh, I wish I'd learned this 3 terms ago and been using it, because now I'm having to do it while I'm trying to figure out what goes in the figure. So just a helpful hint. And if you do have any explanatory notes, and I believe you'll see one of those in an example we're going to use later, that the explanatory note still goes below the figure, just like it would in a table. All right, to the references page now. So most of these are fairly simple changes. As number 1, the references heading, that word references at the top centered, that's now bold. User template, that's already done for you. I talked about the listing 20 authors thing already, so won't go through that. The DOI, moving to one universal format. That's something that you can do with a couple quick find and replaces. So very easy to do, very fast to do. Using live links, which is actually also very easy to set up. And no need to include the retrieved from text when you're giving a link. Also, in APA 6th edition, technically speaking, there was a rule where if the journal issues 1, 2, 3 used ascending paging, where journal 1 was say 1 to 150 and issue 2 was 151 to 300, that you would leave out the issue number. That was confusing because sometimes you would need it and sometimes you wouldn't. In APA 7, and just always include the issue number. And again, don't include the publisher location. You will include the location if you're listing a conference presentation, like a conference paper or conference proceedings, but that's because it's part of describing the conference itself, not because we're giving the publication, the place where it was published per se. Singular they, this is mainly to avoid some very awkward and repetitious he/she/they and other pronouns that some people started using. So you can now use they as a singular gender neutral pronoun and adjective. There is a little write-up on this in the APA style blog that I encourage people to look at if they find it confusing. But most of the students that I've talked to have said that this just makes it a lot easier because they don't feel like they're just repeating the author's name all the time. So you might have something like this example here. Smith in 2010 conducted a study of 142 nurse practitioners in 11 clinical settings. If you were continuing this in AP 6th edition, you'd probably just say Smithson found. But to avoid it, because we know you're talking about the person you last mentioned, you can just use they there. Don't need to worry about if it's he or she, just use they. Now, we have two things that we'd like to do here. One is to make sure that you have time to ask questions. And the second thing is that I'm going to show you in this session my going through a manuscript that a student sent me, and they're working on migrating to writing from 6th to 7th edition, and so they sent their manuscript in progress. I saw a question in there about use of the pronoun they. So in APA 6th edition, and you were never supposed to refer to an author using a gendered pronoun. The rationale for that was to reduce the potential for gender bias. Why might that come up? Well, just imagine that me, a man, was writing about premenstrual pain, and I made some remarks saying, it's not that big a deal. Now, no matter how good research I did, if you just see that with a statement saying, and he said that has a strong potential for bias. So in APA 6th edition, you wouldn't have been using a gendered pronoun to refer to an author anyway. So in 7th edition, even if you know their pronoun, just use they, because it, again, avoids that potential for bias. Let's go ahead and I'm going to, because we're doing very well on timing here, I'm going to say, please, if you have questions, ask away. But I'm going to move ahead with sharing my screen, sharing a Word document that was sent in, and I'm going to go ahead and focus on that. So my colleague, Julie, will field any questions that you might ask in the middle that might be about general APA stuff. And let me just check that everyone can now see the screen that I'm sharing in Microsoft Word. Great. So this is a document that was sent to me over the weekend. I have looked at it just to check if there was any material I might take out to anonymize this, which, by the way, if you're submitting a draft for our live edit program, we always anonymize the manuscript. In this case, I just took out some appendices that happen to have the student's name in this. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit to talk about some features that I see here. The first thing that I spot is that this is not using our dissertation template. How do I know? Well, some of this formatting is pretty close, but it's not quite there. It has some of the margins are close, the table of contents isn't quite formatted, and we have some of the spacing isn't right. Not a huge thing, but as we get towards publication, need to take care of that. Now I see this is being manually formatted. It doesn't have our built-in heading styles. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take all of the text here and I'm just going to copy and paste it into a copy of our dissertation template. So I'm going to go ahead and change the sharing here so that we move to just a blank copy of our new template. You should see that now. Please let me know if you can't read it. You should be seeing some highlighting on the screen. And what I'm going to do is go down to the start of chapter 1. Past all the stuff that is mostly the same as you've seen before. And starting here, I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in. So that's not terribly time consuming, pretty easy. Anyone can do that with the copy of the template. But now I'm going to show you some of the reasons why we want to be using this. First of all, I'm going to open the styles pane where if you go to home, if it's collapsed, just click that to expand it, and this styles pane button here. So this shows all these template styles that weren't in the student's document that they sent in. But if I were to go ahead and select here, see, oh, yes, that does have the heading that will make it appear in the table of contents. And if I go ahead and pop up the navigation pane here, that's view navigation pane, I can see which parts of this have the headings applied and which don't. So I'm going to go ahead here and just quickly look through at these headings and show you how I would apply them. So this is going to partly be just putting it into our template and partly APA 7th edition because it's so easy. So this is supposed to be a level 2 heading. Click, select it, click APA level 2. Same thing here. Select the heading, APA level 2. You'll see that the spacing is actually changing a little bit because of some custom formatting that the student had done. It's not a huge deal, but it helps make the document look more consistent when we're using one style that makes it always look the same way. And I'll show you in a moment the big time saver here, because I noticed that the table of contents had been created by hand, which involves a lot of counting page numbers that no one should have to do. Here, watch this. This is what's called a widow. It's a heading that's just hanging out by itself. Hit APA level 2, and it now moves to the next page, which is good. You don't have to go manually add any line breaks. It's just taken care of automatically when you use the style. And I think we're almost done with this chapter. For the starting things I was going to show you. All right, so here we have significance, and then we have a heading underneath that. So that should be a level 3 heading, which you see from my applying the style automatically became italicized. And this is now a level 4 heading. Level 4 headings don't appear in the table of contents, so that's actually fine as is. We don't need to do anything here. But we'll just go ahead and look through here, level 2. Just checking here. This looks like this should actually be a level 3 heading because it's a subset of significance. There was an excellent question about single space block quotes. We are moving to a more consistent style of using double space block quotes. Now, this is a good point to mention that in general, you don't want to be using many block quotes, if any, because if it's a passage that you're quoting, it should really be something where you're discussing that specific wording. But if you are going to use them, yes, they should be a double spaced. Okay, we are almost done with this chapter. And we see, aha, a figure. Now, if you're wondering what happened here, well, sometimes when you are formatting something manually, you end up applying styles to things that you didn't realize. So if you see something like that, just go ahead and delete the spaces back to here, hit enter, and then on this new one, all you have to do is go select body text. Now the paragraph looks correct. So here we have a figure that should be starting on a new page, so it's kept together. So I'm going to add a page break here. And this should be figure 1 with no space. Figure 1, and then this should be in title case. Now here's a time saver for you. If I'm in home, I can go ahead and select this button here and change case to capitalize each word. I still have to change of it back, but overall that's faster than my going and changing all of them. So that's a quick way to get some of the capitalization done. So now this figure, we just need to have this note be italicized, and there we go. Continuing on. In fact, I'm going to turn on track changes now, so some of these things I'm going to do will be a little bit more visible now that we did the big global stuff. So here, that's a heading, level 2, and another level 2. And the chapter summary. So that's also level 2. So that should be the last major subsection here. And if I go up to the table of contents here, here's where the real time saving comes in. Because if I right click on this or control click using a Mac and select update field, boom, we have all of those headings in there without my having to go in and count up these individually. It's also a great proofreading thing because we can see, okay, there's some text that's repeated in these. Maybe there's a way that I can go ahead and simplify that, or perhaps by using the abbreviations to make that just a more manageable heading itself. So when you see all these things laid out here in the table of contents, it's a lot easier to spot those potential issues than if you're just scrolling on through. I saw an excellent question about the visibility of the styles pane in Word. So first off, if you're not using the current version of Word, do be aware that you can get that through ACU site license for free. It is included as a faculty perk if you're a faculty member, and as one of the things that you pay tuition for if you're a student. So please go ahead and download it. It's a lot easier when you're working with the current version. Second of all, if you're working with a smaller or low resolution screen, you may not see everything. I'm going to resize my screen here. And so if you can see now that it's much narrower, that some of the buttons are covered over. So if you're working on a very small laptop screen, and you might have to change your zoom to see that, or you might need to expand the Word window to fill all of your available screen to spot it. All right, so let us talk about some other things for migrating to APA 7th edition, because I do want to leave some time for those questions. So the headings is the thing that people usually have the most trouble with because they're not using those earlier. Let's look at the references here. So I mentioned that some of the changes are very easy, fast to do, like hot linking. Well, here's an example here of a link here. I'm just checking how this was done earlier. So this was formatted manually where they hit enter there. So just delete that there. And once it's all what Word considers one line, and to show you, I've removed those manual breaks, adding a hanging indent so it does that spacing automatically. Once you're at that stage, or if you're there already, all you have to do is go to the end and hit space, and then ta-da, that's a hot link where it says, oh, that's a hyperlink. Let me make that work for you. Let me do that again on this example here. Just hit space, and it turns it into a link. Here, I think we need to quickly clean that up. And then same thing, end of the line, space, ta-da, it's done. And if you have any trouble or you're wondering, why isn't this working, just make an appointment with the Writing Center and we can work things out for you. So that's very easy and fast to do. Let's go ahead to the top of this reference list, and I'll just talk you through the proofreading process that I tell people to use. So this should always be starting on a new page. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to insert a page break. The shortcut for this is Control-Enter on a PC or Command-Enter on a Mac. And you'll see that this very first entry has a DOI here, or kind of a mishmash of two different DOI styles. So let me make that 1 here. And if you recall in the slides, sorry, I saw a related question. I'm going to pause to answer that and come back to it. So the question was, for hot links, do you need to turn it to a black or leave it the default color? So we have it set in the template, so it will pick the color for you. So just make it a hot link and that will follow. You may see, depending on your settings in Word, a different color if you have clicked on that hot link from Word. And some people do that just to test all their links, and they want that setting so that it shows them that, yes, they have tested all of them. That is a user customizable setting on your computer. But our template will make these be the right color when you submit this and turn it into a PDF. Good question. So back to converting DOIs. So this here is the oldest DOI format, the one that's actually described in the APA 6th edition manual. So what we're going to do is do a find and replace search. Now to do the find part, you need to go up to the upper right-hand corner, or just hit Control F or Command F and search for what you want, which is DOI colon. I'm going to pop out the replace menu here, and I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, anytime there's DOI colon, please replace this with https://doi.org/. And I'm going to first go ahead and do this change if there's any space after it, because I saw that error is down here. So we want to get all those. Just hit replace all, they're done. And now I'm going to do a search for DOI colon without that space there. And let me take out that duplicate there. And we'll go ahead and get that too. All right, so now we know that all of those DOI colons in the old version are done. And to make those hot links, so just click there and hit space. Now, there's a very excellent question in the chat box about subtitle capitalization. This is the title of the article. This is the subtitle. The first letter of the subtitle should be capitalized. So in the reference list down here, if I search for a colon with a space and a lowercase a, say, and made this case sensitive, it would show me, oh, that actually happens a couple times. So whenever you have something where you think you might be doing this more than once, I just do a find and replace, and I can see, oh, let me very quickly replace 6 of those. And those actually should be changed up here too to capital. I'll go in and get the bolding later. At this point, I think we need to go back to those question slides and field any other questions that people have. So I'm going to pause here, and we're going to move back to sharing my slides here. Just a moment. Okay, so I hope you've been asking questions as we go along and not holding them here. But we have a couple frequently asked questions in case you need a little bit more time to uh, respond them. So first, a couple tips. Be calm. AP 7th edition is not like the New Testament coming out and, oh, don't do all those things anymore. And you can eat pork, by the way. It's more incremental evolutionary changes, not a revolution. It's good to make a checklist of things that you feel you would benefit from remembering. We encourage you to use our some notable changes slides as a start, and just have that checklist of things to look for, because it does take some time to develop new habits and get those new rules down. And again, you can always come to the Writing Center, whether you're sending us a quick email or whether you're making an appointment asking for help doing something. So there's a question about font sizes and font choices. So technically speaking, APA 7th edition lets you choose your own font and font size. Practically speaking, I do not recommend doing that. Yes, you could turn in a paper in Comic Sans font and say, this is APA 7th compliant. And your professor would probably glare at you through this computer screen. So we recommend that you just stick to Times New Roman 12-point font, just as we have updated our templates to continue using. If you are getting any direction from your professor, it's probably going to be to do just that. If you, for whatever reason, choose your own font, be aware that you want it to look professional. 12-point is a good threshold for being readable. Some other fonts are not super readable even at 12-point font. So Times New Roman 12 font is a very safe choice. And the last thing is that be aware that there are some special characters that the statistical things might not look the same in other fonts. So if you want it to be clear that you're using that fancy X symbol that's used in statistics, I'd say stick to Times New Roman, because some fonts don't even have that one. Other questions that you might be thinking about? We are going to be doing all the rest of the semester's assignments in APA 6th edition. That doesn't mean if you're a doctoral student and working ahead that you can't convert your manuscript to 7th edition and just get a head start on it. But if you submit something to us and you've already converted it to 7th edition, just put a note saying, oh, I would like to get feedback on my 7th edition changes, because otherwise we look at it and say, oh, is this something that you're getting graded on? Because if so, you might want this to be on 6th edition, because that's still what's required. So just be aware, and if you're working ahead, let us know if you contact us. We are going to be releasing our schedule of webinars as near the end of the current term, and we have already programmed Intro to Graduate Writing and Intro to APA style of versions updated for APA 7th edition. So don't worry, those will be there to help reinforce this. And if you have a group of students and that you want to have a customized presentation for your class or your cohort, we certainly do that. We try and accommodate those requests. Just, ask sooner rather than later, because if you give us a couple weeks notice, that's easier than if you ask us, hey, at 3 p.m. today, in which case, not saying it can't happen, but it's harder to get everyone on board. The APA 7th edition manual you can view it as an ebook for free right now. This is a limited time thing, and just like a lot of theater companies and bands and stuff are making stuff available on the internet during the current health crisis, the APA manual is only available for free until they say, okay, things have gone back to normal. So you can certainly browse it, but we do recommend that you purchase it, because it's so much handier to reference and to bookmark and to be able to see those specific examples for the exact thing that you're looking at. And that concludes the formal part of the presentation, right on the hour. I did see a request for a link. Let me go ahead and grab that. I'm going to stop sharing. And I think my colleague and I will both stay around in case anyone has any last questions. But I hope you'll agree that APA 7th edition will make all of our lives simpler because there are fewer nitty gritty, well, in this specific instance, do this other thing kind of rules. It's just what we call rationalizing the system. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the slides and grab that link. And if you have any questions, just fire away.
Thanks, Dr. Considine. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been really wonderful to see everyone in here. Great questions. If you have any others, I'm happy to answer them as well.
Oh, one other general piece of advice is if you are worrying that you'll be held accountable immediately, we understand that there's going to be a transition process. Our goal is to help get you started up front so that by the time we're into the fall 2 term, that you've got a good foundation with the APA rules for 7th edition. So we expect that there'll be a transition period where everyone's learning this and developing the new habits. So please don't stress out about that. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we will just hang around for another 2 minutes and then bring it to a close. All right, I think we're good. Let's close out this room.